Shirt Club. Yep. Shirt Club. I have very little to say about this episode. I have virtually no opinion about it whatsoever. Which I'm sure has you thinking, holy crap, AJ doesn't have an opinion about something? Well, surprisingly, it does happen from time to time. To be perfectly honest, this episode leaves virtually no impression on me at all. And that's not to say that I dislike the episode or anything. I don't dislike the episode. I actually find it quite funny in a lot of places. I just don't see why it's an episode of this show, if that makes any sense. I mean, no one's out of character or anything. That's not my problem here. And I guess the message of this episode, at least as far as I can decipher it, works in the context of Steven Universe. It's just, of all the episodes that I would call episodes that are approaching filler, this is the most fillery of them. To very quickly break down what this episode is about, Greg has decided to start offering guitar lessons, so he has enlisted Steven to create flyers for the service. So Steven draws this really rad picture of Greg with like a six-pack and stuff, holding a guitar that apparently shoots lightning bolts. And I gotta say, while the line work isn't perfect, the kid's definitely got an eye for composition, because this thing looks pretty badass. And he shows to the Gems, and it's really cute, and this is one of 2 cameos that the Gems get in the entire episode. But it's really cute. They try to offer some criticism to him, and then he runs to the Big Donut to put flyers up. I guess he's going to put them up all over town, but that's where he starts. And in walks Buck Dewey. And he inexplicably looks at the entire menu and then orders a salad. Despite the fact that not only is the salad not on the menu, they don't even have the things to make a salad in the store. And apparently this is something that Buck does a lot. And all throughout this episode, Buck just kind of comes off as this rebel without a cause, in a very literal sense. He wants to be rebellious, but he doesn't actually have any reason to be rebellious, and I'm going to get into that more later on. Anyway, Buck sees the flyer, and he's immediately taken with it and wants to turn it into t-shirts. So he and Steven turn it into t-shirts. They use, I guess, a staging area for Mayor Dewey's various campaign and PR endeavors. And while they're there, with Mayor Dewey, he's there as well, they come across some old flyers that Buck himself had made to try to help Mayor Dewey get reelected. And I would imagine he was a young kid at the time, probably around Steven's age or maybe even a little bit younger. And Buck is visibly embarrassed by the flyers, but his dad finds it really endearing and really enjoyed seeing them again. Anyway, they make all these t-shirts, and Buck says they've got to be controversial about it because art is controversial. It's supposed to make people talk. So they get a t-shirt cannon and go and stand on top of a building and start shooting t-shirts at random passerbys on the street below. And I want to talk about that just a little bit. I want to have a little bit of an aside here. Twice in this episode, we see imagery where the characters who are being entirely innocuous are portrayed as if they're snipers, as if they're finding a good vantage point and then sniping people. I don't like that. I just don't think that that imagery of a person finding a high vantage point in a populated area and then taking shots at them is a funny image. And I'm going to move right along from that. I'm not going to dwell on it. People start picking up the shirts. They actually seem to like them. They start wearing them around. Steven's all psyched because he thinks he's going to get a lot of business for his dad. But he's kind of surprised when he finds out that people are coming by to see his dad, but not for lessons. They're coming by to take pictures with him to kind of laugh at the joke that Steven and his dad aren't even in on. So Steven goes to Buck and tells him that he doesn't want to make any more shirts. Basically that he doesn't want Buck to use his art without his permission. And Buck refuses to stop. And so Steven once again goes to the Gems and tries to get their help with this situation. But they kind of determine that it really isn't an issue worthy of their attention and tell him he needs to deal with this problem on his own. So Steven, in an effort to solve the problem himself, goes with a t-shirt cannon and some t-shirts that he has made. And climbs into a tower and starts firing t-shirts into the crowd at a dedication that Mayor Dewey is having for a new bench. And this is the other instance of that terrorist sniper imagery that I was talking about. I just don't understand why it's here. But we do get a couple of really good scenes here. People start picking up the new shirts, and it turns out that Steven made shirts out of the old re-election flyer that Buck had made for his dad. And we get a couple of rapid-fire scenes here. One, where people who are wearing the Guitar Dad shirt are picking up the new shirt and calling it even funnier than the Guitar Dad shirt. And we get another really quick scene where Mayor Dewey looks at the artwork on the shirt and thinks that his son made these shirts for him and is touched by it, and Buck is likewise touched by it. And the episode ends with Buck revealing that he's going to take lessons from Steven's dad. And like I said, I have very little to say about this episode, aside from just summarizing the plot, obviously. Clearly, they're the things that I already said about some of the imagery just not being something that I enjoy. I'm not going to get into why I don't think that this kind of sniper imagery is appropriate for a show that is meant to be watched by kids. I don't think I need to. What I am going to talk about here are a couple of things that I liked. I'm not a huge fan of Buck in this episode. I think he's kind of a jerk in just really chill, inoffensive kind of way. But a jerk nonetheless. He at one point calls Steven's artwork terrible, and flat out admits that he only took interest in it because he feels like he can turn this terrible image into a joke. At Steven's expense, at Steven's dad's expense. And that's the moment that Steven kind of realizes that he and Buck were definitely not on the same page about this whole thing. And I'm sorry, but, and pardon my language here, that's just an asshole-ish thing to do. It goes back to what I said earlier about Buck being a very literal rebel without a cause. He wants to be rebellious about something, but he doesn't have anything legitimately to rebel against. So he kind of just does these things that he thinks are rebellious and he thinks are controversial to fit some kind of status quo as a rebellious teen. And by the end of the episode, we see that he's kind of learned his lesson because he has now been the butt of a similar joke. And the scene at the end where he comes and says he wants to take lessons from Greg is his way of kind of saying, hey man, I hope there are no hard feelings. I understand that what I did to you was wrong. And that's all well and good. It's handled well enough. I just think it could have been handled even better by a plot that was a little less forgettable. I also really love Mayor Dewey. Just in general, I think he's a great guy. They keep setting him up, they keep putting him in these situations where he could turn into the typical corrupt politician that you see on television all the time now, but time and time again, he just shows the most innocent reactions to things and proves over and over again that he's not the typical corrupt politician that we see on TV all the time nowadays. He's actually a really genuine person who loves his job. He cares about the people that he is managing. He really cares about his son and gives him as much time as he feels like he can. He goes to these silly dedications that don't mean anything without any ulterior motive. He's just a good guy. And something about that just makes me feel really good. Yeah, there are a lot of terrible, corrupt politicians, but there are some good politicians too. There are some people who treat their political positions with the respect that they deserve and genuinely care about what they do. And it's just really nice to see those guys get some representation in media. That, and he's just a flat-out likable character. The ending where you see how touched he is that Buck might have done this for him, might have gone out of his way to use this piece of artwork that he's clearly embarrassed by to try to help Mayor Dewey get reelected. It was very sweet. And seeing Buck react to it the way he did, where he's also clearly touched by his father's actions, by his father's reaction, was also very sweet. And I thought it was a good way to kind of cap the episode. All of that said, though, this still feels the most fillery of all of the filler episodes of Steven Universe. It's perfectly fine, but it's not an episode that I would ever go back and watch again just because I wanted to see it. Of course, I'm sure there are some of you who absolutely adore this episode, so please tell me, what did you think of this episode? If you have seen it, let's get a discussion going in the comment section down below. Either way, this has been AJ22, and I will talk to you guys later.